Start recording. Hello, it's a great privilege to join you, albeit virtually and in a recorded fashion. I'm speaking in my capacity as the CEO of the Ethics Institute. We are based in Pretoria, South Africa, but we work across the continent and also beyond the continent in various parts of the world. Our focus is on building ethical organizations, and we found over the years that collective action is a very important tool for us in our attempts to fight corruption, but more importantly also to build integrity in organizations. Now, collective action is a very old concept in one sense of the word, in the sense that whenever people come together to jointly tackle a problem, they are busy with some form of collective action. And it can be applied to fighting crime, to cleaning up a city, whatever common purpose there might be. But in recent years, collective action, of course, became very closely associated with anti-corruption. And as the Ethics Institute, we also were privileged to be involved in quite a number of countries on the African continent where we were instrumental in launching or facilitating collective action efforts. And we find it a most powerful mechanism to use. And of course, also quite a safe mechanism, because we all know that when individuals speak out, it's easy to isolate them and to really do damage to them. But when people act as a collective or speak as a collective, there's safety in numbers, and there's also much more efficiency and much more effectiveness. So what I would like to do is to share with you just a few examples of the many collective action initiatives in which we were involved. The first type, which is quite common, I think, across the world, is about leveling the playing field. And I think about the initiative that we had a few years ago in Kenya, where there was corruption around import tariffs. Some people were paying the normal import tariffs, other people were bribing public officials, and in that way did not pay the full amount that they were supposed to pay. And obviously this led to a lot of frustration. Up to the point where some of the key players who don't want to be involved in corrupt practices came together, call on their peer organizations and say, can't we do something about that? And we were called in to facilitate that initial internal conversation where these players realized that if we want to engage with the public service and specifically around tariffs, we need to make sure that our own house is in order. So it typically started with them committing to certain ethical standards, and on the basis of that, then approaching the public sector authorities, and they were able to have a conversation, a good conversation, and to change things for the better. And this is a typical example of a very short-term, very focused collective action that really had the desired effect, and people moved on, and the level and the playing field was much more level after that. Okay, so that is the one type of collective action that I think always works well, because there's energy, there's focus, there's frustration, and people are keen to resolve it. And therefore they are willing to put time and resources into such initiatives. The other one that I've seen in a number of countries, 3 countries comes to mind, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola, Mauritius, and for different reasons there was a desire on the part of the business community to signal to multinational companies doing business in those countries, but also to international investors, that there are companies who are serious about doing business in an ethical manner. And in all 3 of these countries, it typically started off with the development of Integrity Pledge, where the players in the private sector came together and said, we are willing to put our name on paper and to sign to it, that we commit ourselves to do business according to specific standards. In the case of Angola, for example, we got the involvement of all the major chambers of commerce in that country. They all supported the effort, and in the end, it ended up where companies came to the fore and they signed this pledge. In Mauritius, it went somewhat further in the sense that they take it beyond just the pledge, and they also developed a self-assessment tool where companies can assess their own integrity, their own anti-corruption systems and procedures, and even created the opportunity where certain companies, if they wish to do so, could be verified externally. In other words, an element of independence and independent verification came in, and all of this as a manner of signaling to multinational companies that we are a company of integrity, or we are a country. In this country, not everything is corrupt. There are players who are serious about ethics. And I think this was also worthwhile initiatives that we've seen there. A third and final one that I would like to share with you is where companies face a common challenge. And as we all know, these days there are lots of extraterritorial anti-corruption legislation. Probably the most famous examples are the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of the USA and also the UK Bribery Act. And in terms of that, companies are held responsible not only for their own behavior, but also for the behavior of their supply chain. So the old moral principle that you cannot outsource your immorality to other parties now became actually a legal principle as well. And it became an offense if you tolerate corruption in your supply chain. But as a result of that, many companies who in some other way fall under this extraterritorial anti-corruption legislation that obviously, as the name indicates, applies the world over, now face the problem that they have to train their suppliers on ethics and anti-corruption. And now, especially in SME suppliers, small and medium enterprise suppliers, they typically don't have an ethics management function or a formal anti-corruption program. So therefore, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy of multinationals to train all their SME suppliers on ethics and anti-corruption. So as a result, a coalition was formed here in South Africa called the Coalition for Ethical Organizations. And they had a few objectives, but one of them was to collaborate around developing one standard program based on international standards for their SME suppliers around building ethical organizations and fighting corruption in their internal processes and procedures. So all these companies who form part of this coalition pooled resources, made funding available, and they approached us at the Ethics Institute to develop such a program for them. And as a result of that, they now have a program. It's called the Ethically Aware Supplier Induction Program, or we abbreviate it to the EASI program. And they all recognize this program. So if a SME supplier would show up and they want to contract with them, and the person can demonstrate that they have completed this ethically aware supplier induction program, the company don't have to train the SME suppliers again, because the poor SME suppliers were now trained by every company, every multinational company that they want to contract with. And of course, it led to a lot of training fatigue, but also a lot of waste of time, because the same things were duplicated by different companies. And it's quite clear to us that this is not only a problem here in South Africa. So in the meantime, we were able to also roll this out to other English-speaking countries on the African continent. We've translated the program into Portuguese, and it's now being rolled out in Mozambique, for example. And we are also in the process of translating it into French to also make it available to the Francophone countries in Africa. So as a result of this collective action, it had a spin-off of something that started as a common challenge here in South Africa, now also affecting SMEs and giving them an opportunity in other countries on the continent. In closing, I think we learned quite a number of lessons in the process. Sometimes we work with the public sector or with public sector-led collective action, other times with civil society-led collective action. But in most cases, we've worked with private sector-led collective action. And we always find that there are a few things that are very important. The first one is there must be focus and energy. In order to drive any collective action initiative successfully, you need a very specific focus. It shouldn't be broad. It shouldn't be ambiguous. It should be to the point. And if you really hit it on the nail and you find an issue that is of great concern to everyone involved, you would see there's the commitment and there's the energy. And then, of course, collective action initiatives needs coordination. Although there are many players, but these players need to be coordinated. And you don't always want to establish a new body, a new organization to do all the coordination work. And this is where we have found that non-profit organizations or non-governmental organizations can play an important role because they often are independent and can offer that type of coordination and facilitation service. And that's probably the reason why we as the Ethics Institute have been involved in so many of these initiatives. And one thing that we don't need to forget is you need resources also. Human resources, financial resources. These things aren't free. They do cost money, and we've often found that collective action initiatives might dwindle if there is not sufficient resources put behind these initiatives. But in short and in closing, we believe that, and it's our experience firsthand, that these collective action initiatives do make a big difference. It is a very important tool to fight corruption. And for our individual companies, it just amplifies their voice. They get safety in numbers, and therefore it is also a much safer way for them to really tackle big problems head on. Because we all know that there are certain problems, and corruption is one of them, that cannot be solved by one single company. We do need a collective action effort there. Thank you. Stop recording.